Back in 2004, Penn and Teller, the comedian team, they did an episode of their Showtime show Bullshit about PETA, and they were extremely critical of you and your organization. I'm just wondering overall what your thoughts were on that episode, and if you just had any general response to what they said in that.
Yeah, I think they were cheap, and it was sort of a lure to get people to watch, and they were misinformed. And I really think that they should be ashamed of themselves. The major part of it was this myth of euthanasia being a bad thing. Euthanasia means a humane death. It means a mercy killing. And one of the things that PETA has always done, which you wouldn't find out from them, is we have one shelter. It's an open admission shelter. It's in Norfolk, Virginia. And we will take in animals who are on their last legs, animals who are wrecked with cancer, animals who have been hit by a car and are crushed to pieces. When people, which more and more over the years we're seeing, don't have the money, the $200, the $300 that a veterinarian will charge to put their animal down. And so they wait and they don't do it. And so we say, it's free. Come to us. You can be in the room and hold your beloved dog or cat as we put them down. And you will know that it went so well, that they didn't feel anything. And so we've offered that free service the whole time. And what we're up against, of course, more and more, is that people hear the phrase no kill. And it sounds great. And it could be great in many instances. But that's a perfect world. There are animals who need desperately that final kindness, is to be allowed to escape from pain and from suffering. And no-kill shelters won't give you that. That would ruin their statistics. Sorry to say it in such a callous way, but you can't be no-kill and provide euthanasia services. We've never said we're no-kill. We provide euthanasia services and always have done and always will, no matter what anybody says. But Penn and Teller did a cheap and dirty trick and just sort of said, look at them, they're killing dogs and cats. We adore dogs and cats. I mean, why on earth would we take a healthy animal and do that? We wouldn't, we never would. We do our best, but we take in the dregs, if you will, the ones that have the door slammed shut on them in other places, and the ones who are not going to be relieved of suffering because people just don't have the money.
And just quickly, just a couple other issues that they raised. One was in regards to animal on animal violence. So basically what they seem to be saying is that if you were to release like every animal from every zoo and pound, there would be, you know, I guess they're saying like it would be unmanageable and there would be all these animals attacking each other. I guess that also does raise just the general question of in nature, right? Like animals do treat each other unethically. So like what should be sort of a human response to that kind of, you know, what we would consider unethical treatment of an animal attacking and killing another animal?
Well, I think their premise, I mean, nobody's going to open the doors and let the giraffes and lions out, are they? So that was kind of just ridiculous. But yes, in nature, some animals kill other animals. That happens. It's funny because you always think we should clean our own house first. It's like not look over and see what lions are doing and say, oh, well, they do it, we should be able to do it. They're also carnivores and we're not. We're omnivores. We're best suited physiologically to eating plants and fruits and things like that. But yeah, animals do kill other animals. The funny thing is, it's not that funny actually, is that when humans eat meat, they eat vegetarian animals, chickens, pigs, cows. And if you look at what we're doing in factory farming and the manner in which we slaughter, we can't hold our heads up high at all. We are behaving so barbarically. I mean, animals must look over at us and think, good grief, what are you doing? I mean, no animal factory farms to have other animals live in their own muck with parts of their ears and beaks cut off and then turned upside down by their legs and hung up in hooks and have their throats cut while they're still conscious. You know, the human animal does that, and we can do better I mean, we've got everything in the world that we could possibly wish to eat, every taste. No, we don't need that. And yet we think, oh, well, you know, other animals do that. It was an excuse. And now either Penn or Teller, I can never tell the two apart. The tall one is now vegan.
That's funny. Well, yeah, just the one last thing from that episode. They also were seemingly pointing out hypocrisy, especially with one individual at PETA, who I believe takes insulin. And generally, their point overall is that you know, the medical testing on animals is beneficial to humans, and that there's a wide variety of treatment for all kinds of different diseases, and that human beings would be dying if not for this medical testing on animals. And again, they pointed to a specific individual at PETA saying basically that she's a hypocrite. So I'm just wondering what your take is on that. Like, if it is saving human lives to do this kind of, you know, even if it is cruel, if it's amounting to saving human lives, then isn't it effectively worth it? And like, sort of like the trolley scenario with the switch, like it wouldn't be worth it to kind of save humans, even if it's at the expense of animal life.
You know, the funny thing again is they got that wrong too. The person they identified as having needing insulin used human-based insulin, which is more sophisticated and safer than pig-based insulin. She used humulin, but they didn't bother to ask. So they assumed, because they had a preconceived notion, that they wanted to get PETA. And it was just grossly unfair and wrong. This humulin, and that really points up the fact that if you look for an alternative that's better, you're going to find it. And if you don't look, you aren't. I mean, look at AIDS, for example. We marched in the very first marches with a banner saying, you know, we want a treatment for AIDS, or we want to prevent AIDS too, but animal experiments aren't the way to go. And people said, oh, get lost, we have to save lives. Turned out it was true. And we have so many scientific experts, we have so many physicians, so many specialists who back us up, who say, you know, animal experimentation is just an old-fashioned big business. And even back then, which was before we had so many of the alternatives we have now, because people went and looked for them, they used chimpanzees, hundreds and hundreds of chimpanzees that they kept in small metal cages, in boxes, see-through boxes basically, infected them with HIV, human AIDS, found out that they don't get it, and they suffered for years.
Wow.
In Free the Animals, I talk about a laboratory that used those chimps, and chimps are so intelligent, so social, so feeling. Dr. Jane Goodall said, once we had exposed that lab, which is now called BioQual, that she had never seen anything worse in her life than them kept in these things called isolates, where all they heard for their entire existence, which is decades, in a box in which they couldn't stand up or turn around in, was the hum of the machines bringing air into the isolate. They weren't allowed to be touched. They couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't walk because they were infected with AIDS. The thing is that they didn't provide a cure because they don't get it. They get a thing called simian immunosuppressant disease, which is completely different. So then eventually we got the cocktail that was a treatment for HIV by trying various things on computers, bombarding various things with human blood, and finding out what combinations of drugs worked. That's how we got the cocktail, not from animal experiments. So whatever you're doing, blowtorching pigs in burn experiments, when if you'd put the money earlier into developing human skin tissue that you can now ship, you can clone human skin, you can ship it Federal Express to a hospital, you can save over 60% of burn victims. All these things. Diabetes type 2, you can cure with diet. You know, these NIH-funded studies now show you can. But all the money that goes into animal experimentation is squandered to the detriment of human health and to the abject misery and suffering. and the killing of millions of animals. So where there's a will, there's a way. And we do have such wonderful, wonderful research tools available to us today. There is no excuse for what's being done to animals in labs.
Well, Ingrid, I have one patron question. Before we get to that, I just had one last question that I wanted to ask about ethics. And so in regards to human beings and animals, is the position of PETA that ethically human life and an animal life are ethically like the same? They have the same value?
Well, I think it's probably easier to understand in thinking about isms. For example, we know that sexism is wrong, and we didn't always. You know, women were told your place is in the kitchen and the bedroom, and otherwise be quiet. And yes, even your husband can rape you if he wishes, and you can't own property, and you can't go to medical school. We used to actually believe that. And then came a time when we realized, hang on a minute, women and men, yeah, there are differences, but they all deserve consideration, respect, and not to be exploited and to have rights. And the same thing is with race and with age and with child labor. We used to have terrible, I mean, you can still find it today in some places, views of people who of another religion, of another country. Their culture didn't make sense to us. We thought they were stupid. We had human slavery, you know, and it was acceptable. It was fine. And people would say, well, Black people, Black men, you know, don't feel pain the way white men do. And Black women don't mind having their children sold away to another plantation because they don't feel motherly love, maternal instinct, the way white mothers do. People believed it. I say today, look at, if you're against exploitation, be against it on principle. If you're against violence that's needless, be against it on principle, against bias, against prejudice. Animals, we're animals too. And we forget that. We somehow think we're gods, and the rest of the living beings on the face of the earth are trash or are put here for us. They're not. They have thoughts, they have feelings, they have interests, they have desires. And as I said, you know, they feel loneliness and pain and joy and love, and they just want to live just as we do. And they just want to be free, just as we do. They don't want to be chained up in a circus, caged in a laboratory. They want to be respected for themselves or just left alone. So in that regard, I think we share a lot in common, and we need to get over ourselves and open our hearts and our minds to who they are. They're not things. They're not a table or a chair. They're a living being just like us, but we don't treat them that way.
So I'm wondering if you could extend the same logic to other forms of life. Like if we're going to say that you know, humans and animals have, you know, relatively the same ethical value, shouldn't we also be trying to treat plants in the same way? Maybe even like fungus, maybe even bacteria. Like I'm just wondering, can you extend that logic all the way to all forms of life, or is there something about animals that is inherently different?
Well, I think it's that we don't know enough. And there are people who say mycelium, you know, is an intelligent network fungus under the earth that's communicating with trees for nutrients and water and fires and dangers and so on. And it may be that one day we find out that is true. I don't think we know enough yet. With animals and with plants, of course, we don't know. Some people have done experiments that they put fire near them and the plant recoils, and they may have a different nervous system than us where they do experience pain. Who knows? One could always give them the benefit of the doubt. But with animals, there's no question. We're animals, chimpanzees are animals, mice are animals, foxes are animals, and we all know without any question that we all have nervous systems that are similar, that we all experience pain, and that we all experience fear, and all those sorts of things. The commonalities are absolute. And so there's no question there. Where we go in the future, I don't know.